Hello guys, I thought I would do a quick video of what I learned tuning this car with Sniper EFI. I have done some installs before and put in base tuning, but usually I send the car to a tuner. I've also done a little bit of this on the dyno, but on the dyno we're only working up here, wide open throttle. Just trying to get the mixture right so we can do the dyno run. So that's not really the tuning the car so you can drive it. This is the first car I've done which is a tune to try and make it drivable and nice to drive. And I thought I would share what I learned in the process of that. And I am no expert, so don't take anything I say as gospel in this particular instant. But I did learn some things. Now, this particular car was a Chevelle 454, regular kind of heads, a bit of a camshaft, and this is a dual quad Sniper EFI. So it's got dual 4-barrel throttle bodies. And it was not drivable with the base tune. Now, I did a little bit of work at Flash Automotive trying to get it to run better at idle and cruise, and ran across some regular things which I want to share, which really has nothing to do with the EFI. I found the distributor had a phasing problem which I needed to fix, and to get it to actually idle better, we had to kind of crack the throttle blades, because it does have a camshaft, and get the idle air control motor down to where it was only reading the very barest of being open. And that's really where you want it to be. You don't want the idle air control motor trying to control it. You can get fluctuations and whatnot. So you want to give it just enough throttle blade that the idle air control motor is still doing its job, but it's at the very bottom. This also helped because with the target RPM for idle, when you went from being out of gear to being in gear, it was able to still maintain the idle because the idle air control motor had a range that it could actually work in. And we had to kind of jockey the idle speed just a bit so that it had a nice spot where it idled very well. And that took some work, and I got a lot of that done. But in general driving, we didn't do a good job on the rollers because it's a little different. Now, remember, when you're on a roller or dyno or somebody else is driving the car, where you are on the map changes according to the driver a little bit. If I'm driving, and I'm told I kind of drive like an old man, I'm kind of down here. I'm not getting in it that hard. Somebody that's a little more aggressive, you start seeing where the map is up here. So to start with, whoever is going to drive the car, they need to probably drive the car while you're tuning. And that will ensure that you're in the right part of the map for where the car is going to be driven mostly. Now, I wound up using a laptop and going for a drive in this particular car with the owner driving in order to try and get this better. And because it's the first time I've done that, there was a bit of a learning experience. I spent 3 hours on a first day, and I had it running pretty good, but then I lost the entire file. So you need to pay attention to what you're doing when it comes to some of that. And so I had to start all over on another day, and I planned ahead a little better. When you first start doing the tune, you want to come up here to File and start a file for that day and that tuning, and then as you've liked things that have changed, keep saving it into that file so that if either you do a change that's really not good, you can back up a little bit, or you have a good copy if something happens. And of course, you want to pay attention to your power on the laptop to make sure the laptop doesn't die on you. I didn't have that problem. I did have to stop at one point and plug in the laptop for a while so that I had some more power in it. Now, I know a lot of you guys say these are auto-tuning, and that's not completely true. Now, the fuel map here will kind of tune itself over time. But if you're way off, especially based on a base tune, you need to speed up that process. Now, there is a learn table that will show up. This one's blank, but as you start to drive, this will populate with changes that it wants to make. Now, those are not necessarily changes it's making, it's changes that it's thinking ought to happen. And when you're out driving around, if you just leave it up to the system, it'll think about that for a little while. It might make a little change here or there. But it could take you 100 miles. It could take you quite a bit in order to really get the tune right by letting it use its learning program. So you'll kind of want to speed that up. Now, when you're hooked up, I like the idea of the laptop. Using the little handheld thing, I think it'd make this a lot tougher. And all you really need is a cable, which I think is about $50, $60 for these. That'll plug into the Sniper. The software is free. If you have a good computer, this is a Windows 7 computer. This one happens to be in a nice rugged laptop, which is nice, so I can kind of, be in the car, not too worried about the laptop. But any laptop will work. And that will let you see a lot more. Plus, you can kind of pay attention to this while the other person is driving. Because even on the base fuel map, when you're doing this, you want to watch where the bubble is floating while you're driving and listen to the car. This isn't much different than a carburetor in that you want to listen to the car. Is it burbling in the exhaust? Is it kind of acting like it's maybe leaning out a bit? There's lots of things that you can hear in how our car runs. And as you watch the bubble, you can see where it is on the screen and know where to work. So in addition to the auto update from the learn table, I was also going in and blocking out sections and changing them to something that would put it closer to a tune. Because the tuning thing only does a little bit here and then a little bit more. And depending on what you have it set at, you can set the learning program to where it barely changes stuff. So you need to look at that too. How much learning is it trying to do? But you can keep going and try and get it closer. And once I got a good section, I kind of adjusted out to other sections because as he was driving, he was kind of in here, but I needed to widen it out so if you were driving it a little bit different, it would still be okay in other driving styles. And I was using what was here in order to try and figure out what ought to be out here. And you can block out these sections. You use the left key and highlight, box out a section that you want to do. And then you can hold the control button and use the up or down arrow to change the number up or down just a little bit. You can keep tapping it and get the numbers to kind of be in the same way, but you're not actually changing them all to the same number. It just adds to whatever is in that box already. So you have the differential still in place, but you're raising that whole little section. So in this case, when I was in cruise and I was having a little bit of trouble, I was able to go in. Now, you can actually do that while you're driving too. So you can actually change the mixture a bit while you're driving and try and see how it goes. Now, I didn't find that part very useful. What I did was we went for a drive, and I figured out a nice drive place where we had stoplights, we had some regular driving, we had a place where we could kind of get on it, we had some uphill, we had some coasting downhill, so we were getting into other gears. We could get on, this was a 4-speed, so we get it all the way up into fourth gear and see where it was at. And so I had a real variety in this little course we would do. And we'd go drive the little course, and I'd come back, and I would look at the learn table. Now, like I said, this one's blank because I'm just sitting here in the house. But it would populate up with colors and how much change it wants to do. So you could kind of see where you were. Once you get used to where you're watching the bubble float, you could see where the changes needed to be majority done in a majority amount. I would then take it offline. You got to go offline, and then you can transfer what's on here to the base fuel table. And then after I would do that, I would go back up to the base fuel table and see if there were some other sections where I needed to kind of change it a little bit myself. And that's where I would do the block out a section and hold the control button and do the up or down arrow to kind of adjust that section to speed up the process. Because otherwise you could be at this quite a while. And so then once I do that, I could go back online, which I can't do here because I'm not hooked to a sniper, and I could then sync what was on the screen to the sniper, basically upload the changes to the sniper. And then we would go for another drive and see how it did. Now, this sped things along very well. The first day when I was working with the program I lost, I had about 3 hours into it, and I was getting pretty close. Now, the second day, I tried to get a little fancy and do some other things and maybe outguess it to make it better, because I am new at this, so some of it I kind of wanted to see. And I had told this guy that if I couldn't get it, because I was working for free, I was just trying to learn this particular system and see how it goes. I told him that we could send him to one of my tuners, but they charge quite a bit. I mean, it can be from $500 to $700 to get a good tune on a car. And I wanted to start trying to learn some of this. I've told you guys in other videos, I am a carb guy. I really am a carburetor guy. And I am trying to expand out into more fuel injection because that's the way things are going. And so I really need to know it more. And I don't always want to farm out basics. And especially with like a sniper, the tuner guy that I use, he's not real fond of the sniper. If we put in a full-fledged Terminator or Terminator X or some better system, and it's a full-blown race car tune, man, he's all in. But on some of this basic stuff, he doesn't really like doing it. And I was thinking the sniper is probably simple enough. I could figure out how to do some of these tunes. And we got this car running really well. I mean, it's probably to 90% of where it needs to be. At that point, I told him, I'm kind of done. You just need to go drive it some because it's very drivable now. And let it just kind of think on its own. Plus, I turned down the tuning so it'll just kind of nudge its way into that final good tune. And then he can put an SD card in his little control panel and save the program at that point so he has a copy of it. Because the copy I have, of course, is on this computer, which is Courtney from Flash Automotive. This is his computer I borrowed to do this. So that's some of the basics. Now, I know a lot of you guys say, well, this thing will really auto-tune itself, and it'll get there. But it can take a long time, and like I said, I was trying to speed up the process. Plus, you need to be aware of there are some pieces that it does not take care of on its own. Now, this particular car did not have timing control, so I didn't need to worry about trying to get the timing table correct. This one was strictly fuel. Timing curve was set. I did all that when I first got the car to idle well and just putz around the building okay and, make sure that it was, functional, which is what I did initially. Now, if you come down here, one of the things that came up, because I'm at altitude, remember I'm at 7,000 foot, most of what I was doing was really leaning this out because the base fuel map is too rich because I'm at altitude. And so it really started coming in line as I brought things down. Now, one of the things that cropped up at like cruise is I had a bit of a flutter, and, well, it doesn't quite show it, but I tried using the 2D table here, and that didn't really help me. I wound up with flutters when it was going between different things. So I went back to simple, which has got idle, cruise, and wide open. And I did have to nudge those around a little bit. I had upped, because again, remember, I'm at altitude. I had upped the air-fuel ratio a bit for idle, which really helped it idle a little bit better, because it wasn't trying to target quite so rich. But at cruise and wide open throttle, I had to kind of adjust those a little bit so that its target that it's trying to hit and adjust to is correct. Now, if you get it to where it's running real well and then down the road it's driving worse, that's because of the target air fuel. If the target air fuel isn't really what the motor wants, then it'll drive the fuel map off into left field. So it'll be okay and then it won't be okay. And if that happens, you can go back to your base tune or back to the tune you saved that was good and kind of readjust these a little bit based on whether or not it was trying to make it too rich and that made it run worse. So you could then lean it out just a little bit at cruise maybe and make that better. Now the other thing that came up once I got it a little leaner is you've got acceleration enrichment. And I had to tweak this table a little bit. This is basically like the accelerator pump on a carburetor. And I just pulled up the values just a little bit at a time to get rid of hesitation. Initially, once it started getting to where it was lean and proper mixture, we wound up with an initial little hesitation right at low, getting going, and then mid-throttle, and so I had to kind of tweak around on this a little bit in order to try and get rid of those funny little hesitations, because it's not all about what the mixture is on that base fuel table. Even if this is correct, it's about the change in TPS because things change rapidly, and it's just like a carburetor. You need a bit of an accelerator pump, and that's what that is. Now, I also played around a bit because we're in a warm climate with temperature enrichment, in that I took some of this down, and basically this is your choke. So I'm never going to be way over here at negative 40. So don't even worry that says 150. I mean, we'll never be there. And this car probably wouldn't run at anything less than about 40 or 50 degrees. The guy wouldn't take it out of the garage if it was that cold out. If it's down into freezing, that car's not coming out of the garage. So I really only had to worry about in here. And I just kind of adjusted that a little bit. And I may have to go back, or he can do that on the handheld. I did kind of show him, because it's going to take 2 or 3 cold starts. And in winter, when he does a really cold start, it might have to be nudged up a little bit to see how it does when you're doing that first start, because you want it to just start with the key and run. And this is basically your choke, just like on a carburetor. So I took it off a little bit earlier, because in this climate where we're at, by the time the car's 160 degrees, it's pretty well warmed up. It really doesn't need a choke anymore. And so there's no reason to do it. Now, this particular motor runs at about 215 degrees. You can fuss with it a little bit if it's a motor that tends to run hot, but this one ran pretty solid at 215 degrees. So all that was pretty straightforward. But none of this auto adjusts. This is stuff that you need to take care of and make happen. And So you've got temperature, the acceleration, which don't make big changes. I mean, just kind of keep pulling it up until you get it away, because you don't really want a rich shot all of a sudden. You got to think maybe a little bit about your target uh, fuel ratio, what you want. Remember, again, I'm at altitude, so it does kind of change things just a little bit. Um, I know somebody's probably going to argue with me that the system should correct for that, but I can tell you changing that cruise one just a little bit got rid of this funny little flutter right at cruise that we didn't have, and in that section of the fuel map, we didn't have when we drove through it. On the base fuel map, if you ran through, it was just fine. But when you started hovering right here at cruise, which is just, steady state, 50, 60 mile an hour, in high gear, flat road, you're just kind of cruising along, freeway cruising. And so that's part of the reason that this section is a little different, and part of why I changed the target air-fuel ratio just a little bit at that point, and that got rid of the flutter. And this car started driving really nice. I mean, I wouldn't call it perfect, but it was better or as good as any carbureted muscle car I've ever driven. I mean, it was very, very drivable. It was very fun to drive. It didn't have any funny burbles in the exhaust. It didn't have, we didn't have pulling in extra fuel at the bottom when you back off of it. It did really well at wide open throttle when you nailed it. In fact, this car with that overdrive and the gears in the back, the guy really couldn't get it up to as fast as this car can go. On the rollers in the shop, I had it up to 160 mile an hour. But out on the road, that's a really tough thing. And judging by this guy, he's not going to be able to drive it or want to drive it at 160 mile an hour out on the road. But with the gearing, it's capable of doing that. But that overdrive and what gear ratio you're in and whatnot, and the load on the car changes with everything you do. And that puts you in a different place on the map. And that's why it's really best to have the guy that's going to drive it do the driving. And that puts you in the right part of the map, and somebody else to watch where the bubble is and listen for where problems are, or listen to the driver say, well, wait a minute, I gave it a little bit here and it's got a hesitation. It's not going right away. Address those issues as you go. And we just did a lap and came back to the shop. I took, 5-10 minutes, kind of updated some things. We went and did another lap and just got it better and better and better until it was really sweet by the end of the day. Now, I'm pretty slow at this. Like I said, this is the first one I've really done a regular tune on. And I would say it's going to take you a good 3-4 hours in order to keep doing laps and kind of do that. And keep doing the learn table and force feeding the auto update and downloading the stuff into the system. But those are the things that I learned when I was doing it. And it's really pretty straightforward. I mean, by the time we took a car that really couldn't drive well at all, and the owner of the car was all smiles by the time we got done, because it had become a very fun car. You worry about other things being wrong with the car or whatnot, and we got to the point where it was driving sweet. It was fun. You get in and out of the throttle. It didn't have hesitation. It didn't have any extra enrichment like you get on a carb. So this is really better than a carburetor if you tune it and you listen to what the motor wants. Just like on a carburetor, you've got to use your other senses. What do you feel? What do you hear? How's it going? You can watch the dashboard up here a little bit and kind of see air-fuel ratio, but I really found it was best to kind of watch the bubble and see where I was on any of this to see where the problem was, because that lets you know where on this you want to fix it. So that was my experience. If you get one of these, I would highly recommend you get the cable and download the program into a laptop and do it from a laptop. I think this is way better. And for a basic tune, the cable, like I said, I think they're 50, 60 bucks. I don't know if you'll have to come up with a laptop, but these tuner guys are charging more and more. And even if it saves you going to a tuner once, it's going to more than pay for itself. And if you just kind of think about what you're doing and think about it kind of like a carb. Like I said, I am a carburetor guy. So a lot of times when I'm listening to the motor, I'm thinking, well, what would I do with a carburetor to fix this? Would I jet it down here? Would I go to a different power valve? And then I just tried to kind of mimic it on the screen with what I was doing. So anyway, that's what I learned. That's how it went. That was my second day, technically, of tuning a car. First car that I did, a driver tune. It came out very well. I feel confident that I'll get a lot more comfortable on this as I do more of them. And I'm starting to think, at least for the sniper setup, which is a very basic setup, it probably doesn't need to go to a tuner. I mean, there is only so much you can do on the setup. Now, some of these other systems, you've got to, if you're going fancier, you got to make sure that the sensor is the right number, that the injector table is correct, that there's all this other stuff, and that's where you're really paying to have the good knowledge of a tuner, or put it on like a hub dyno. But I will tell you, a hub dyno or a roller like I was on does not load the car the same as being out on the road. And I really found it interesting to watch, even with change in temperature during the day, so that we were further down here because the air was not as good because the air temperature had come up. It was a 100-degree day by the time we were towards the end of this. And it changed where we were, and you could actually see it. So all those factors, how he drove, at times I told him to drive just real normal, just like you're going down to the grocery, don't really get on it, just kind of drive it like you would normally drive it, to just drive. And then other times it's like, okay, drive it a little more aggressive, but don't think about flooring it. And then we had some spots where it's like, okay, now let's get it, nail it and go to 100% throttle, and let's get some of that sorted out for at least as fast as you can go. And he didn't. You can see we didn't really get way up here in RPM because, especially with the overdrive, that car just flies. And you're going to need a long stretch of road to get up there. And I don't think he's going to be driving. Once you're doing 120, 130 mile an hour, it's pretty well what it is, especially when it's a really nice, well-painted, beautiful muscle car that now drives really nice. So he can start driving it like a regular car and have problems. And the only thing I expect I might hear from him back if he has a little trouble when we get into colder weather with the initial start. But he can also do some of that on the handheld. And I kind of talked to him about taking a laptop and getting a cable so that he had a setup if we needed to do it. Now, I'm going to also save this so that I have a copy of it just in case he calls me and I've gone on to my own laptop since this one is on Courtney's. So Courtney will have a copy of the table. The guy has it in the sniper at the moment. He was going to get an SD card and save it. So he has a copy of it. And then I'll have a copy of it. So if something happens, even if it's a bad sensor, a bad O2 or something that drives it off in the left field, we can go back to a program that we know is pretty decent for how the car drives. And then we can work on from there as to what happened and why. Whether or not I need to change target air-fuel ratio or whatnot. But that was my experience. That was just a couple of days of learning. And it's really not that hard. I probably have a bit of an advantage because I've done carbs so long, and so some of the sounds a motor makes, I know whether or not, where I need to do, like the blurbling when we got backed way out of the throttle, I knew that means there's fuel in the exhaust, and so I need to change that section quite a bit in order to make it better. So that's how it went, and I wish you luck on all your projects. And this stuff really is not that hard. And as I do some of this other fuel injection stuff, I'll do a few more videos and show you what I learned, even with my ancient old Commander 950, which is terribly crude compared to the Sniper that I was doing here. And I have whoop, there goes the video. No, there goes the screen. Sorry. And I have another install that I'm doing in a car with a more sophisticated computer. So I'll keep you guys up to date. Hopefully a few of my tidbits actually help you understand how this goes and maybe get your car a little better tuned without having to pay somebody big bucks. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.